So today we're not going to go through a formal presentation. We're going to talk through some of the issues related to running an elite practice. Matt and Rob are going to go back and forth and share their insights. I know it's going to be helpful for everybody. So let's jump right into it. The first one we're going to throw off to Matt Oxley around client acquisition. Matt, you spend more time than anybody I know out in the field meeting with teams. We just got you back in the office today after another week of travel, and I know you talk so much about client acquisition. What are the trends you're seeing now?
Well, you know, the trends that we see with client acquisition from elite advisors in particular, because elite advisors are the ones that are bringing in million-dollar new relationships, but the rest in the industry is struggling. And it's just what our parallel research, we research the affluent. They tell us they've discovered their advisor from a personal introduction or through a referral alliance or some form of social networking, word-of-mouth influence. Well, the number one marketing activities of today's elite advisors are getting personally introduced by a family member, a colleague, a friend of an affluent client, or a referral alliance partner, you know, a CPA, an attorney, a banker, and then it's followed by word-of-mouth influence, socializing, and then intimate events. It's all about really relationship marketing. And, you know, Rob, you know, what's your experience out there, you know, from the Supernova perspective?
Well, I think, you know, Richard Weilman said it probably best. People buy differences, they don't buy similarities. So we, as coaches of the elite financial advisors, have to remind them that you've got to create first an elite experience. You've got to create a memorable experience and a uniquely better experience. And then you've got to communicate that experience to your clients, educate them so that they understand what it is that they're getting and that it is in fact different. They'll know it, but part of our job is to turn our clients into our advocates. And Bill Cates, in his book Get More Referrals Now, probably does it better than anybody I've ever seen in terms of first establishing, which everyone has to do, a great client experience, but then turning those 100 or so clients that you have into your sales force for you. So that's it. I would say, Matt, the truth is that in today's world, word of mouth, getting referred by your best clients to other best clients, they refer up, they refer parallel to themselves. So your best clients will give you the best opportunities, along with centers of influence. As you mentioned, professional centers of influence are still critical to your growth. And our best FAs, the ones that are really growing, institutionalize this. It isn't a once and done or once in a while. It's something that they work on all the time.
Now you mentioned something here that really highlights something that I want to drill further down, because, you know, it's interesting. You know, with the research we do year after year, we've discovered that the affluent client view and the financial advisor have different opinions about referrals, because, you know, the affluent client, even though they'll check the box off in a research, you know, would you give your advisor a referral if asked? Yeah, check their box off, yes. We're very, very specific when we ask these questions in our research. You know, between 75 to 85%, depending on the year, but the vast majority feel awkward when they're asked for a referral. And yet, if you ask them to, you know, could you personally introduce me to your colleague Rob Knapp? If you have this expanded relationship that you mentioned, you know, where you're really the real deal, and they like you, trust you, respect you, and you've expanded just from a business. Now you're doing business and social. You're up to between a 75 and 85%. Sure, but advisors tend to look at referrals and introductions as one and the same.
Right.
and yet the affluent specifically do not. The easier we make it for the affluent client, and we're very specific on this, to help us, the more help we get. Does that make sense to you, Rob?
Yeah, Matt, it's a great point, and one that we don't really want names. We want introductions. We want personal introductions.
Exactly.
And the first is face-to-face. If we can get a face-to-face introduction, your probabilities of closure go way up. And I find that our best FAs, our best advisors have a process for doing that. The next is a phone introduction. And then I'm not really that interested in just names. If I don't get a phone introduction or a personal introduction face-to-face, I think that your probabilities of closure go so far down, it's hardly worth it.
Well, you know what's happening right now is trust is so fragile right across the board with the affluent consumer, and it's important that everybody understands the distinction. You know, we're looking at people who have, you know, $1 million or more of investable assets. When it comes to trustworthiness and advertising, from some to full trust, this is 2015 first quarter. Not one industry is even close to 50% of sum to full trust. This is not just financial advisory. Banks lead it, by the way, at 33%. Then you go down to financial advisory, 26%, insurance, 26%, pharmaceuticals, 25%. I mean, you know, you got people making fun of these Viagra ads, and then you have weight loss and fitness products at 4%. So what we have found is that when these personal introductions occur, it's almost counterintuitive that the majority of them are occurring in a social atmosphere, because it's easier to build rapport and develop sort of a connection than when you're not just immediately focused on business.
Hey, Matt, I think along those lines, you know, we talk a lot about intimate events, and that's been a real trend we've seen. That, you know, 6 or 8 years ago, we'd ask an audience you raise your hand if you've hosted an intimate event like a wine tasting or barbecue, and you'd get a few front runners who'd raise their hand. But nowadays, so many people have tried these. I'm curious on your two perspectives. What makes an intimate event effective? What can make it to where their clients are coming and bringing guests?
Go ahead, Rob. Take the first.
Thanks. Okay, I would say the first thing is if it's a hobby or a personal interest of yours or your spouse, then there's a lot more credibility in it. For example, my wife and my daughter and my son all love cooking, and my daughter's a chef, and so for them to host a well-known chef and an event at a restaurant or at a professional class on cooking would be a natural, and clients would love that, and they would bring their friends, because, you know, birds of a feather flock together. In this case, people that love cooking, and there would never be, you know, it would be such an intimate experience and such a fun experience. There would be none of this, you're just doing this for business, that sense.
Right.
So I think that's important. So if you're a golfer and you love golf, and you bring bring your pro together and host some clients with their friends, it's going to be incredibly well received. Photography classes, car shows. You know, we had one where we had hosted a classic car. We had Indianapolis, of course. We have the classic car races here, and then you can host that very easily. And for us, you know, the people that are classic car advocates, that's just wonderful for them. So there's so many creative ways to do this, and so many fun ways to do it. It works great. And then you get into the more public art shows, you know, at the museum, private concerts, on-stage dinners for opera, private showings of Everest at the IMAX, and things like that are fun, but they're a little more public. So I think both work, and clients love both, but I think the private...
Yeah, I agree with you completely, and yet, you know, one thing that we have seen, to your question, Stephen, and is that advisors need to really, I call them, these are the contemporary public seminar. With a handful of clients, a specially sourced name guest, maybe a CPA and spouse, but they need to be planned, the pre-work, then the actual event itself, what's the game plan? We call that the strategic intent. Who are we going to meet there at the event? And then the follow-up. What's the follow-up of the event? And then having these events either they're monthly or maybe bi-monthly, but we even recommend having them monthly. And when there's no business, it makes it safe to have normal discussions. And the advisors, they just don't want to do them once in a while. They need to do them regularly, and then they get good at it.
Yeah, it sure seems like, Matt, the first feedback we get from advisors hosting events is that, yeah, it was fun, everybody had a good time, but not sure what all came out of it. And what they realize is the preparation is what distinguishes these elite groups. They put in. I've got one team I work with. They have a prep call with us before every intimate event to talk about the conversations they might have and who's responsible for which clients, and there's a lot of thought that goes into it.
Right.
Well, hey, gang, shifting gears, let's talk time management. Rob, I know this is an area of specialty for you. How can advisors take back control of their time?
Great question. This comes up all the time. I think the more successful we are, the more our practices, we become victims of our practice. Our mission at Supernova is to improve the client experience worldwide. So when we truly think about creating that experience that is going to differentiate you in the market, there's a couple different ways you can take back control of your time. And we have preferences, but the reality is there's only a few ways to do it. So what would you do if you could cut back on the number of clients? I call that hard to do, but it works. And in fact, economically, it's probably one of the most efficient things you can do. You can cut your service, which again is easy to do, but could cost you some of your best clients. And then finally, you could segment your clients into A, B, C, and D. Now, this doesn't really solve the issue of too many clients. It's really a way of cutting back your service. It can work, but you don't have a consistent client experience across the universe of your clients. And in many cases, you have to almost hire a separate person just to manage the time. And it takes enormous amounts of time and coordination to orchestrate a really effective ABCD model. So we at Supernova advocate the first, which is to cut the number of clients to something that is manageable and then give those clients all a super experience. And this would be similar to what you'd get if you bought a Mercedes or if you go to the Ritz-Carlton. You don't have levels of service. You have great service and then better service. Over to you, Matt. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And yet I would just add a caveat there. Not only do you cut back on the number of clients, what we find with these elite teams, I was just meeting with a bunch of teams. These are big teams. They've got, they had anywhere from 250 million to, close to $1 billion in assets. Yet, when I asked, what's the profile of your ideal client? They were sort of all over the place, and they all had way too many clients, and they might have segmented them to A, B, C, and D. They were talking about their client experience, but you could tell by the number of clients they had that they really hadn't zeroed in. So I asked them from a marketing perspective, what's the profile of a client you want to market to? And they're sort of all over the place. So I really think that, you cut back the number of clients, but advisors need to focus on what's the ideal client we want to service, that we can create that client experience for, and this enables us to then replicate, our top 20 clients on a regular, that's where our marketing goes. So I think cutting service, you're absolutely right, that's ridiculous. But, what we see with the elite teams in our research, we see most of the elite teams have two service models. They have, an elite model, we call it the platinum for their top tier clients, and then they have a second tier of clients that are good profitable clients, but they scale back the service model, and they might have, a junior advisor as the relationship manager, or their, what used to be a sales assistant as the relationship manager, and still providing outstanding service, but not like the platinum level. Have you seen that, Rob? Where they do two levels,
Yeah.
not the ABCD.
Right, and this is the challenge, because it's so tempting. Because these guys pay me, how can I
Right.
let them go? I'm charging.
Right.
In fact, I charge them more, Matt. This is what they tell me. Okay, I charge.
Oh yeah.
I charge.
That makes you. Yeah.
I charge my big clients 75 basis points or 90 basis points, but these little clients, I charge them 1.5 to 2%, meaning I give them less service and I charge them more. And I say to them, to think about what you just said, is that if the clients knew that, right? If that was public information, would that
It's horrible.
really, would that improve your brand?
Oh gosh.
And our research says that your brand is not determined by your best client, but by your worst client.
And that's an interesting statement right there.
And we also like to say that every client deserves to be somebody's A client. So we would rather, you see what I'm saying? I'd rather see that client be referred to someone else where they're a big client for them. They're going to give them that A service.
You're so right. And I used to tell advisors years ago, and I don't do it as much anymore because most of them have segmented their business, but when they ask, or if it's I know our coaches do it all the time, but I used to tell them, I said, if you paid a junior advisor 10 grand to take your C and D clients away from you and let them have 100% of whatever revenue is generated, it would be the best 10 grand you could spend. And they would look at me like I was crazy. What? I'm not going to give them away. I'm going to give a 50-50 split. And I said, you can't get blood out of a stone. If you were managing those CD clients, you would starve. And, we've never seen an advisor who trimmed and jettisoned clients who didn't have a serious growth spurt as a result.
It's wonderful to hear that, Matt, because that's my experience. And just on the compliance side of things, if you do a 50-50 split, just keep in mind when that client ends up suing the other advisor, you're on the lawsuit, and you can spend
absolutely.
a year.
It's ridiculous. You're exactly right. It's a liability to you. You're not servicing them properly. They get neglected. If the junior advisor isn't doing what they're supposed to be, you're exactly right. We're definitely on the same page.
This is crazy, Matt. We agree on everything.
Well, the beauty of it is that when you're both students of the game here, you're both studying elite advisors, there ought to be a lot of commonality.
Well, that's true, Steve.
Yeah. Well, hey, shifting gears, let's talk relationship management. I know that's near and dear to both of you guys. Matt, we'll toss it to you first. What are the elite advisors doing to strengthen affluent client relationships?
Let me just start by answering that, we look at this as relationship management, relationship marketing nexus. They're inextricably linked. Now, what elite advisors are doing to strengthen affluent relationships, first and foremost, the fact that they are outstanding professionals. They've grasped Supernova. They have this really excellent client experience. It's there, it's consistent. That's not a value proposition. They recognize that. That's a hygiene factor. This is what's the minimal expectation that you're an upstanding professional to an affluent client. No different than, my cycling tennis buddy, who's a cardiologist, is an excellent cardiologist. That's not a value proposition. the value proposition is that he strengthens that relationship by calling my house after he's worked on grandpa in the hospital. So what elite advisors are doing to strengthen these relationships, they're getting social with their clients. They're doing the sort of intimate events, but even more intimately. They might be going out to dinner with husband and wife. They're making certain that they're connecting with, both spouses of the relationship. They're connecting with the millennial children of the relationship. And we have 5 years of metrics now that show when these elite advisors, and the elite advisors are the ones who are doing this very well, expand the relationship. They do excellent professional work as an advisor, but then they expand it so they allow their clients to really get to know them on a personal level. They're interacting with the clients on a personal level. They are rated higher in every performance metric, from investments meeting expectations to financial planning to the service model to the real key thing here, which is trust. And and Rob, are you seeing something similar to that?
Yeah, man, it's really, we call it the bank of trust. When you do what you say you're going to do and you do it consistently, you make deposits into the bank of trust. When you're late, you make withdrawals. That's a little bit of, it's a mini trust buster. So the more times that you interact with the client in a positive way, the more deposits you make into that. You build an intimate relationship. And what the advisors tell me is this: Rob, I've never had been able to go into such depth as I am now since I've been talking to my clients on a regular basis. We recommend, our studies back in the 90s told us that clients want to hear from us monthly. They want 4 reviews and twice in person. And that in the in-person meeting is when we highly recommend that the spouses be together as an educational experience for both spouses. And that's more important today than ever because everybody's so busy. But if you can train your clients to come in and visit with you twice a year, and you take the time to really get to know the other spouse, they say that statistically, if you are not talking to one of the spouses, that during that conversation, you should be spending 70% of your time looking and talking to the spouse you're not typically talking to. And they will think, oh, he spent about 50% of the time talking to me. So it's really important with as many divorces and deaths among our elderly that you take the time to do that. So yeah, Matt, it's really important, and we are huge, of course, advocates of.
But so here I'm not going to differ with you. I agree with you totally. But I'm going to take a shot here because I think what you just described, the in-person meetings in the office with both spouses, I'm going to make the argument that's a hygiene factor. If advisors aren't doing that, they have no chance of working in the affluent space and growing their practice. And and so when we do these parallel research projects, we ask a question this is interesting. We've done this many years, but this year it was on the relationship management. We asked the affluent client who had a primary advisor, how they viewed their relationship. Was it just a business relationship, or was it expanded to the business social? 29% said it was expanded to the business social. We asked advisors with their affluent clients, $1 million plus, the same question, and 74% of the advisors said it was expanded to the business social. So it's like we have a different. Yeah, and 3 years ago, or it was 2.5 years, Stephen, was it 3 years ago or 2 years ago, we asked the same question about financial planning to the affluent client. How many of you have a financial plan that's been prepared for by your advisor that you're following? About 28, 29% said they did. We asked advisors, how many of you have financial planning as a core part of your financial advisory or your wealth management process? And like 83 or 84% of advisors said they did.
Oh, it was the same gaps with financial organization, with insurance protection oversight, all of it. There were
I mean,
just
it's almost like
gaps.
perception's not reality, and so going back to what you just said, Rob, that's a hygiene factor. But you better be doing it, and your client better recognize what you're doing.
Well, Matt, I completely agree with you. But the reality that I find is that it's just you're talking even among the private bankers, even with the Credit Suisse and the best of the private bankers, and they're not doing it. They're not doing what we're talking about. I mean, they don't
you're
have,
right.
So there's a lot of hygiene we got.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what's interesting, Rob? If advisors did exactly what you're teaching there in Supernova, not even talking about what I'm saying, expanding the relationship, but we have the affluent consumer, how they rate service experience from good to very good. Nothing is at 80%. The top are restaurants. The affluent go to better restaurants, but they rate at 77%. They rate. Could you imagine an elite advisor rating their client experience at 77% or being rated? Specialty stores 63%, department stores 50%. Financial advisory 47%. So my point is, for advisors who embrace what we're talking about here and take Supernova as the hygiene factor, I mean, they're going to be light years ahead of the service that they're getting from other areas in their sort of consumer experience.
Right, and Matt, here's the other thing. Customer contact, financial planning is the I've been heard factor, and we have a saying that he who owns the plan owns the client. But from the plan comes the agenda. All right, and from the agenda comes the more customer contact and implementation and that sense of real relationship. But if you do this, it used to be that we'd have 24 contacts a year and 36, but when we do this with an executive summary after each call and an agenda before each call, we're ending up with 48 contacts, and that is the cement that keeps the client relationship together. And would I love everybody to do more than that and to do intimate client experiences and to be really close friends with each of their clients and have dinners? And yes, God bless you. If I could get that, throwing a party. Can I get them to do 12-4 too? Not always.
I hear you. You're right.
Well,
but the opportunity is there for those that do.
Well,
right.
exactly right, Matt. And we've all talked about the impact that robo-advisor is having, not so much on the client share they're taking thus far, because we've seen the numbers on that, and these groups aren't huge yet. But it's got a lot of advisors thinking, what am I doing right now, and what will I be doing in the next 10 years to justify the fees that I'm charging? And you guys are hitting on just that. These are the differentiators between what they're doing versus the robo model.
If you're doing what Rob just talked about here, robo advisors are no threat. If you're not doing what we're talking about right here, specifically what Rob's talking about with Supernova, yeah, you're vulnerable, period.
Well, hey, Rob, I wanted to get your thoughts on team building, because I know this is an area of strength for you and for Matt. Question being, how can advisors communicate with their team and keep everybody motivated, consistent, and high energy? And I'll throw in the extra caveat here, even during the summer months like July 4th coming up here.
Well, I mean, one of the things they ask me to do, and what I've been helping advisors do for years, is to get me organized, but keep me organized. And what I find is that our teams are just not organized. They have, and because of the risk of confrontation, they don't talk, they don't confront, they don't hold themselves accountable. Now, do they function? Sure. They're all good friends, they get along well, they function, and they do pretty well. But the elite teams, the best teams, are incredibly organized. They have a mission statement, a purpose statement, a vision. They have a leader, and that leader communicates well. They have a service model that, be it Supernova or some other service model that they adhere to. They even get down to how are they going to dress. How is the office going to look? And that what are our roles and responsibilities? And we use, we call the 5-star model, and we break it down to the 3 things that are important to the client. That is the plan. So we have vice president planning, implementation, and service. And then we have the 2 things that are important to the team, which is marketing and leadership. So if we can help the team to understand their roles and responsibilities in each one of those, then we can build a simple business plan around that and get them from chaos to process in a very short time. But that, to me, is what you have to go to that kind of detail in order to have the team be effective. Matt, you've had a tremendous experience in team building and starting and finishing and helping. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, we've done a bunch of research on teams, and we've coached a bunch of teams, but what we have found from our research, and so we use criteria. You have to be giving that client experience you're talking about. You have to have loyal clients that can't be losing clients, and you have to be in a growth mode. And so from that, we have found that the majority of these teams, basically, we call it the 17%. 83% of these teams out there are just loose confederations of advisors sort of posturing as a team. They might have a brochure or trying to market themselves with a joint number, and they're all doing their individual thing. But the elite teams, you said the key right there is leadership. They are well led. It's the foundation. And then they have a client loyalty process, and they have a business development process, which is the core. They don't lose clients, so they strengthen those relationships. So they have a consistent client experience. They have practice management. They run their business like a business. Roles and responsibilities are clear, just as you said. And there's a very clearly defined wealth management process, and they have their own version or whatever it is, but they do planning. They bring in outside experts. They have their reviews. I mean, and they run it very, very effectively, and they're in a growth mode. And the other thing we've seen is most teams, the loose confederations of teams, 83%, their mistake is when they form. They don't get on the same sheet of music when they form. It's sort of a good idea. I'm in the office next to this guy. We kind of get along. We can pool our resources, and hey, let's be a team. You've probably seen that, Rob.
Yeah, and it's just it's interesting when you see married couples. Oftentimes they're opposites, and they say opposites attract, and that's because you see in your spouse what you don't see in yourself, and you see that as a way of bringing balance to your life. So intuitively, you're smart enough to figure that out somehow when you're a kid and you have no idea what you're really doing. But when we tend to build our client base, that all our clients look like us. When we want to form our team, all our associates look like us and act like us. So then we ask that somebody be a planner, and everybody goes, I don't like planning. I'm not going to be a planner. I hate it. So they were all hunters. And so you get a bunch of hunters together, and they like each other. They respect each other, but nobody wants to plan. So when
it's interesting. I'm going to pick right on that, because what we see is that in these teams, most of them aren't hunters. They don't know how to prospect. The elite teams, the team leader is the rainmaker, can bring in the business. The elite teams aren't hiring some junior advisor to be their marketing guru. You've seen that. I mean, they bring in junior. You're going to be my marketing. The firm's paying for him as some rookie, and then when it comes off the firm's dole, the kid couldn't bring in any business in, couldn't prospect.
Right. And you didn't. I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, there's different kinds of, two peers coming together tend to be similar. All right, when they form the ladder.
Oh, you're exactly right. The horizontal team, right?
The vertical team is I'm the king, and I'm gonna hire everybody, and they're gonna help me market, and they're gonna help me do this. Well, they don't function except if he's on vacation, they take a week off, basically. If they're not organized, the only way they function is when the king tells them what to do. So you have, it's just terrible situation on both sides.
Both sides, but what we've seen in the elite teams, I mean, they can be in both formats. We've seen, but I think 52 or 56% of elite teams are horizontal. I mean, are vertical with a team leader, but a team leader who's dialed in, who's really leading the team, and 30-some-odd% are horizontal. And what we find the challenge with the horizontal teams is who's going to be the leader.
Yeah.
We have three equal. But, going back to communication, Stephen, to your question, and I'd be curious your response on this, Rob. What we've seen with the elite teams, just from the simple point of communication, they have weekly team meetings at a structured time with an agenda. If the team leader's not there, they still have that meeting with an agenda. Everybody participates. They start on time, and they end on time, and they're effective. If you see that,
I don't think there's any bigger spread in anything that we've discussed than in teams, meaning between the good teams and the bad teams. I mean, there's
or
just
dysfunctional team, right?
The dysfunctional team versus the fabulous team. Oh my God, they meet every day. They have a stand-up meeting. They have a Monday meeting. They have a Friday meeting. Everybody knows exactly what they're supposed to be doing. They're bringing in business. They track the business. They have a spreadsheet where they track the business. They have a game board where where all the business is up on the board. They track it. And they're totally functioning as a machine with everybody as efficient as possible. And the productivity that they get out of that, and the leverage they get out of that is mind-boggling. So you can have a planner on that team that's full-time planner. They're charging for planning. And they're respecting their time, and they're respecting their excellence. And that, versus a couple of guys that, and then the firm and the manager feels great. I just formed 6 new teams. Well, good luck. You didn't do anything except to shuffle the chairs on the deck.
What's also interesting about these top teams is that they're always looking to improve. So Stephen spent last year, he must have gone around the country and met with, I don't know, was it 40 or 50 of them, Stephen? And, we had an analytics report that they didn't want to brag to Stephen basically about what they were doing well. They wanted advice from Stephen of what they can fine-tune, what they could improve. And I always find that fascinating. The best of the best are self-aware, and they're quick to tell you what they need to work on, where the average is kind of defensive about what they need to work on.
No, it's absolutely right. And, I always ask these guys when they're interested in hiring me, I said, who else have you had? And they said, oh, we've hired this guy and this guy and this guy. I'm like, really? And they go, oh, yeah, we're always excited about, getting some new ideas. And we heard about you, and so we want to hire you. Okay? I'm like, these guys they're just, so wonderful then to coach.
Right.
They're like, athletes that are willing to listen. That's
exactly right. The best athletes always are coachable.
Right.
And I think that's a key takeaway for all the participants on the line. And gang, we are going to go to Q&A here in just a couple minutes, so bear with us. I know you all have some questions. But I think one of the key takeaways is as you observe one of these elite teams, you'd have a tendency to walk in one of the offices and you'd see the structure and the professionalism and the whiteboard all marked up as Rob described, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, they're a machine here. But they didn't get there in a year. Every year they're working on 2 or 3 or 4 things to help them refine that process, and ultimately they end up being a pretty impressive organization. So I know so far I've been taking some good notes, and I hope all of you have been too, because there's some good sound bites in here for things that are pretty immediately implementable, if that's a word. So hey, shifting gears, because I want to touch on this topic before we move into Q&A. Let's talk social media for a couple minutes. I know you guys have seen the evolution of this. Not to date you at all, but I think it's fair to say you both have been around before social media. How are you seeing the elite advisors use social media to grow their business?
Well, let me take that first, Stephen, because we've done some serious work on that, and we've been. But here's an example of what LinkedIn can do. I mean, from an early adopter of LinkedIn or the innovators, and here's an advisor that we know who's down, he's in a major city. He does an advanced LinkedIn search. He has a couple of clients at this particular, affluent clients at this big organization, does an advanced search for managing director, finds that one of his good clients is connected to this managing director, picks up the phone, calls his client, says, hey, how well do you know this guy? Oh, I know him real well. He's right down the hall. He's a good guy. He says, great, because I want you to personally introduce me to him. This advisor is having an intimate, fun event coming up. So his client invited and this person he was connected to the intimate event, and long story short, a $2.8 million relationship came out of that. So this is like I look at social media as like, especially LinkedIn, like a Rolodex, contemporary Rolodex on steroids if used properly. But you could probably teach Rob and me more about it than we can talk. Rob, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge advocate of LinkedIn. I think that Facebook should be used as a way of highlighting your commitment to your community through your social activities, through your charitable giving, the boards you're on, etc. And you can even put your, we were supporters of a cycling event, and we put that behind my name and Race for the Cure, and it's sort of, people, are interested. 1 in 5 people choose their advisor based on their social commitment to the community. So I think that that's important, and you should highlight that on LinkedIn. But LinkedIn is really the business connection for today's world. And everybody Googles everybody checks each other out on LinkedIn. So having a solid LinkedIn page is critical. We can go through what that entails, but I think the stories are really important. I have one client that she spends her mornings every day on LinkedIn, not all morning, but a couple hours on LinkedIn, connecting to new people and then getting appointments set up through that. Exactly what Matt talked about. And then others have actually used their hobbies to create groups around that particular hobby. So cyclists that are interested in business, and then they do events together. So it's a great networking tool. I just was the beneficiary of being invited down to Brazil, having never been to Brazil, never done anything in Brazil, but Victor and I met on LinkedIn, and he checked me out, read the book, and then invited me down to speak to his company. So there's business in LinkedIn. It isn't just a waste of time. And people are like, well, I don't want to be that public. Well, you're a public figure, okay? Like it or not, you are. And if you're going to market yourself today, this is the play. You need to be there, and you need to be there.
I mean, it's sort of like when we hear advisors do an eye roll, veteran advisors, about LinkedIn or social media, it'd be like doing an eye roll 25 years ago about the internet. I mean, it's like, come on. It's not going away, and it's a valuable tool. I concur with what you said about Facebook. Facebook can also help you uncover, what your affluent clients, their pets, their grandkids, things that are important to you. You can do that for yourself also. But Stephen, what's your thoughts? Because you and Kevin are out there, coaching on this, speaking on this, going coast to coast, especially specifically LinkedIn. What's your thoughts?
Well, I love hearing stories from you and Rob on it, because it speaks to why we're so passionate about the topic, because we as a company, and Rob with your company, we've seen business benefit from being involved in social media. So it's easier for us to talk about. But it blows our minds. I was on a call with the home office of a major firm the other day, and they're saying how much trouble they were having getting advisors to sign up for their social media, their LinkedIn platform. I said, well, what's the challenge? And they said, well, one of it is they don't want to pay the $8 a month for having the access. And after I regained my composure, I said, $8 a month? Are you serious? Why would they have any issue with that for a tool that's so important? And we tell everybody, we don't care if you have no interest whatsoever in using LinkedIn or Facebook for outbound prospecting. That's fine, but to your point, Rob, 95% of the affluent will look you up prior to doing business with you. It's not how they found you, but after they've been referred by their accountant or their buddy next door, they're going to look you up, 95%. So we want to have an online profile that's robust and represents you professionally, just like you represent yourself in real life. And then if you want to go beyond that, we've had a lot of fun in the last few years working on programs around whether it's your ability to profile people in advance of meetings, or whether it, linking back to Matt's comments around getting personal introductions. It's a gold mine for that. In this last year, cold prospecting, my goodness, we've had a lot of success teaching new advisors how to go out and find new business absolutely cold through LinkedIn prospecting. And that, those kind of stories and some of the successes you two guys have shared, they weren't around 5 years ago because we tried to find them. People weren't bringing in that much business 5 years ago. But nowadays, most every firm out there has a few success stories like that are starting to, I should say, get the general advisor public excited about it because people are bringing in business.
Yeah, we've been having focus groups now with the early adopters of LinkedIn, and the stories that come out of that are exactly what you're saying, Stephen. I mean, the advisors are beginning. There's a small percentage that are beginning to put their arms around it. And my advice to veteran advisors out there, who don't, maybe this is a little bit awkward, a little bit intimidating, hire an intern. Have your millennial junior advisor, knight them to be your, social media guru, and obviously you have to oversee them, but you don't have to necessarily do it yourself, Mr. Veteran voice of experience, such as Rob and myself.
Yeah, don't let loose our secrets, Matt. I don't want to. If anybody has gotten a message from Matt on LinkedIn recently, I don't want you to know that it's somebody else on our team sending you messages.
But, no. I oversee it all.
No, but it's fun, and it's a topic for another day. But proper coordination is so important. If you're going to delegate parts of it, there are parts of it you certainly can, but there are some other parts that you still have to be involved with. So I digress. But hey, we wanted to make sure there was time for Q&A here because we've gotten some great thoughts from Rob and Matt. But I know there's going to be some questions out there today. Here's how this works. You can either type a question in using the little chat feature that you have there, or you can use the raise your hand icon, and I can unmute your line. And that is if you have, in fact, put in your audio pin. So, again, raise your hand or type in the question. Matt and Rob are here for you. I see some questions in here already, a bunch of them. All right. Let's start off here right from the beginning. What do you do with potential clients that have been referred from your best clients that may not fit your model? Excellent question.
You want me to take that, or you want Rob?
Hey, why don't you start, Matt? Because I know I've heard you answer that beautifully in the past.
Yeah, I mean, if you get referred, and this is not like a personal introduction, I mean, everything, but if you're referred and some good client's second cousin calls, I mean, the most important thing you want to do is have a good conversation with that person on the phone, and while you're on the phone, you're profiling that person. You want to find out what they're looking for, what they have, and you want to uncover basically what their assets are. And if they're a small client, or a small, they don't have many assets, it doesn't come close to what you're looking for. You basically say, gosh, you don't need the totality of the wealth management services we provide. You don't need to pay for that. What you really need is Z. And whether you refer them to a no-load fund, or you refer them somewhere else, but you give them somewhere to go, and at the same time, when you finish that, then you circle back to your client And hey, I really appreciate your second cousin calling in there. Had a nice conversation with her, but you know, she didn't really need our services. She didn't need to pay for our services. She's not. So we refer her to Zed. And at the same time, you're helping your client. You know, you're educating your client of the quality of the client you really work with and the quality of the referral you want.
Good, Matt.
Rob, do you have anything?
I would just add that that you want that ahead of time. You want to have, we call it stair step to the stars. So if your minimum is $1 million and your is 750 and another buddy's is 500 and 250 and so forth, have that all worked out ahead of time where they know you're going to refer them because you're not going to accept anything less than $1 million or 10,000 in PCs or whatever it is. And make sure, and then you can make that a personal handoff. And the more, you know, just like the introduction, the more personal that handoff can be, the better it is for everybody, including the person that referred you to them. So that would be the only.
Yeah, we see advisors making a mistake, Rob, where they take them on, they feel obligated to take the client. Even if they set the standards, they feel obligated because it's the client. And then, you know, they sit down, they take the client on board, and as soon as this new client leaves, in their mind they're going, oh, why am I got to work with this person now? Oh my gosh. And they don't service the client. They don't put that client into their client experience standard. And then the word of mouth, you know, within the circles of that good client, you know, it comes back to them that, well, yeah, that advisor is really nice when we met, but I haven't heard from him or her since.
Right. Terrible.
You know, it's
terrible.
Yeah, it's terrible. You're exactly right. And there's your branding. You know,
exactly.
It has a negative impact. So
hey guys, another question says, I'm a younger advisor, 7 years in the business. Would you make any specific recommendations for a person in my position, building a practice from scratch? Rob, you want to start with that one?
7 years in the business isn't building it from scratch, but I would say that.
Let's hope not.
Yeah, I know. The big challenge, the thing that I see that advisors do is they sacrifice their acquisition time for service time. And so they go from 90% of their time in acquisition to 80 to 70 to 60 to 50 to 10%. The average is, when I survey them, the average says that they're spending 10% of their time on acquisition. Well, that's just, you're not going to grow. So my recommendation would be, you know, there's a lot of other ones, but just make sure that you're saving 50% of your time for acquisition.
You know, Rob, I couldn't agree with you more, and I'd also say 7 years in the business, just you hit the nail on the head. You're not a rookie. You know, you probably maybe need more support than you have. You know, you got clients, you have things going on, so you need to invest in your business. So before you buy a new home, you know, before you upgrade to the fancy automobile, you know, hire additional support if you can.
Good idea. Smart. Very good.
Stephen, you train a lot of younger advisors. You and Stephen with Fast Track for Growth. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's 7 years in. What comes to mind for me is starting to transition. That, you know, by then you sure have should have been networking in the community. You should have some of the starting points of alliances with other professionals. You should have been hosting some intimate events, and you should be by that point a little less reliant on some of the colder tactics that people have, you know, traditionally used to start their business. So, you know, and LinkedIn comes to mind. We have a lot of fun in our new advisor training around LinkedIn because that is, it's perfect for them. It's perfect for somebody who's a little newer. I mean, whether it's, you know, we just had a session the other day where we were talking about teaching your CPAs and attorney alliance partners how to use LinkedIn, and that being a great rapport builder. Connecting with the children of your clients. I mean, that kind of stuff is a great next-gen strategy.
Good. Okay, good.
Okay, shifting gears here, we have a question, is an elite advisor more quality or quantity? What is the level of production an elite team is usually at?
You want me to take that? I'll go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I would just say, I would say just $1 million in production and above is what I would consider an elite team, and that would be per advisor or close to that. There's a lot of other ways of defining elite teams, but it isn't quantity. It's quality to me. It's quantity of business, but then an elite team is a team that's efficiently managed and very professional.
Yeah, and I concur. It's not quantity at all. And, this industry has always kept score on production. And production is basically a historical marker. It's yesterday, and we all know that there's a lot of ways to generate production. But, what we've seen, elite teams and elite advisors, they do a handful of things extraordinarily well. They provide an excellent client experience, so they're meeting today's affluent clients' expectations according to our research. They do it very well. So their service model, their points of contact, they've expanded the relationship so they have a team, they have a real loyal client base. They don't lose clients, so we measure that, and they have a serious growth mode. So we see elite advisors. There can be an elite advisor 7 years into the business that's bringing in far more business than the $1 million producer down at the hall, who's inherited half of his or her book and just sitting there making a good living. So,
exactly.
Yeah, there's different dynamics, but it's quality.
Yeah, I've often heard you use an exercise analogy, Matt. I know both you and Rob are exercise buffs, and it's focusing less on the current scale and more on the did you exercise today?
Right. You're exactly right.
Well, hey, let me throw out a question here. This is a little bit lengthier one, but I think a good topic. It says some are advocating for an evolution to a fixed flat fee pricing model versus percentage of AUM. Are you actually seeing this model being adopted in any meaningful way by elite advisors?
I am not. Pricing is something that's quite fluid. I mean, you're dealing with, fiduciary issues here that are still fluid as we speak. And maybe, Rob, you might know more about this than I, but I haven't seen, a trend to that yet.
Well, it's interesting, Matt, when we do our research around fees, you get a real mixed bag because we give our respondents, our affluent investors, the answer choices. Which would you prefer? How do you prefer to pay? How do you currently pay? And people give various answers. There's never really a clear-cut winner. I mean, the percentage of assets model currently is in the lead, but it varies. And then you get some color commentary. When we start to do our focus groups, you start to ask them questions about fees. What are you paying? How are you paying? And you've never seen a more clueless bunch of people around fees. And it's not just one group. We've done these many years in a row, and nearly every group you start talking fees, and it's like, well, I think this, and mine might be, and you hear, oh boy, I mean, it's a prospecting gold mine if one of you were on the line, but that's what we hear.
And see, Rob, and I'm curious to this because, Rob, our research with the affluent says that they really want transparency.
Right.
So they're not looking for the cheapest advisor.
I would say the teams that do things very well, they do this very well too. So they know exactly what they're charging, exactly to each level of client. They know what it takes to win. They're not going to compromise their standards. They want all the assets. They charge for planning because they know planning takes more time. And they don't want the client disengaged in the planning process because it's, quote, free. And they don't want to be disengaged because they're not making any money on it. So they want to be fully engaged. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's exactly right. If they're making money, they're going to be engaged. So that's probably the thing that I've noticed the most recent about fees that I find the most interesting is that when I mention, everybody says, oh, I don't want to charge for planning. And I say, well, don't you think you'd be more engaged and do more plans if you did get paid? And
Rob, that goes back to the our research 2 or 3 years ago, where only 28% of the affluent thought they had a financial plan, but 83% of the advisors said they were doing planning.
Right. There's a big spread between what is real and what isn't. I mean, clients, you know, and I just had a call from a client who is a very good client, and he asked me, I'm retiring now, should I do a financial plan? Should I hire a financial planner? Should I roll over my 401k, which is the bulk of my assets, with the advisor that I have, or should I consider a new advisor? Now think about that, how dangerous that is. And that question, why would that question even be coming up if they already had a plan and they already had planned out that retirement? So there's a gap there between, and this was a great team, but they still hadn't done the plan, and they hadn't, they really hadn't prepared this guy. And all of a sudden, he went from, I'm going to retire in 2 years to I'm retiring right now. And this was his question to me, a serious question to me.
Yeah, and you know, so I think the question about a flat fee versus percentage on assets, I think, you know, the affluent really aren't concerned with how their advisor gets paid. What they're concerned about, are they getting what they pay for?
Right. Yeah, when they pay 2 and 20 on hedge funds and do it all day long and love it, I mean, fees are not the issue. The issue is, what is my client experience? Am I getting the best? Is this the best thing? And can I trust it?
You know, it's interesting too, and I'll close this question with, unless you have the consumer, on the consumer research, these are affluent consumers, like the $1 million plus investable asset clients. We asked them their view on price, you know, in their consumption. 5% consistently shop for discounted services, so they're discount shoppers. 60% pay fair price for fair value. And 35% will, you know, they will pay more for more services.
Right.
They'll pay
Those are the guys who stay at the St. Regis or at the Four Seasons and buy the most expensive Mercedes. Do they want a fair price for that? But they want great service.
Right. You're exactly right.
Well, guys, I think we're running up on time here. This has been great for me. I've sure enjoyed it, and hope all of you participants did. One note, the recording will be made available, and it'll be sent out to everybody automatically tomorrow. So if you had a colleague or someone you wanted to share that with, please do. And also give us feedback. We enjoyed this. I sure did, and I know Matt and Rob were looking forward to it. If you want us to do more of these, shoot us an email. You see the contact information on the screen here. Let us know what you thought, and we'd love to do it again. Matt, Rob, thanks so much.
Hey, Rob, I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Thanks
You're
very much.
Pro.
Good to you. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Cindy, and everybody else associated with building this today. We appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Okay. All right. Bye for now.
Thanks all.